what happened was that the avant-garde movement got its high priest with John Coltrane. And Coltrane came along and really thought of himself as making a religious music. Of course, it was avant-garde music, and it was sort of free, and it was, people described this saxophone playing with these solos that were going on for 40 minutes, all in the upper register, speaking in tongues and being possessed by spirits and all this sort of stuff.
Coltrane clearly was asking a lot of the audience. I mean, some people were just offended. It was noisy and loud and relentless, and they ran from it. I know my first response when I heard him do it live for the first time, it was truly a white noise. And when it was over, I felt elated, and I couldn't explain why. I certainly couldn't have analyzed what was going on up there, but there was something about the force and the sincerity and the drive. This music seemed to just take you out of the conventional world, and it defined the period.
John Coltrane insisted that jazz could speak to people's souls, could help to heal a corrupt and tortured world. His vision extended far beyond race and nationality. The main thing a musician would like to do, he said, is to give the listener a picture of the wonderful things he senses in the universe.
The thing that's always in John Coltrane is the lyrical shout of the preacher in the heat and full fury of attempting to transform the congregation. And that's the source of John Coltrane's power. His music is very earnest. Like, you think of the most earnest person you ever met, that's John Coltrane. Just well-meaning, and his sound, it just projects such a deep belief, and it's so warm with spiritual substance and compassion. And his playing is just, it's so lyrical and beautiful and singing and soaring, but in the middle of the sound itself is an earnestness that when you hear it, it changes the way you perceive the world.
In 1964, Coltrane made one of the best-selling jazz albums of the decade and one of the most influential records of all time. It was a 4-part devotional suite called A Love Supreme.
That's one of the first records I ever heard, and I hope it's the last record I ever hear. I mean, it's one of the greatest records of all time. I think with that record, you feel that the artist, you feel that John Coltrane is just, he's laying his soul out there. It's right there. It's one of the purest forms of expression you're ever going to hear.
The first time I heard of Love Supreme, it's like one of those records I couldn't put it down. I listened to it for like 6 months straight. I just kept listening to it. I would put on the Love Supreme in the morning for breakfast. Then I'd put it on at lunch. And I'd put it on when I go to bed at night. I would put it on when I was watching the television. It was just on all the time. I couldn't believe that kind of sustained intensity. And everybody talked about the physical challenge of it. But as I spent more time listening to it, and as I got older, I realized that once you put yourself in a certain intellectual frame of mind, I mean, what is physical? Because it was almost as though he had transcended the body when he started playing.
Over the next 2 years, Coltrane put out 10 more albums, each one more experimental than the last. In 1966, someone asked him what his plans were for the next decade. To try to become a saint, he said. But he had only months to live. John Coltrane, 40 years old, died of cancer on July 16th, 1967.
When you think about John Coltrane, he recorded from 1955 till his death in 1967. The body of work, the amount of changes, the amount of artistic success in those 12 years is astonishing. Some people are shooting comets, and we just have to appreciate their pain and be lucky that we were on this earth at the right time to really appreciate them.
Let's welcome Miles Davis and the quintet.